Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. As you can see, we're being joined today by a very special guest. Roni Vayre is here today. And for those who don't know who Roni is, she is the marketing director at Plan to Eat, which is a meal planning app made for planner personalities. I know that is me. She's also the host of the Plan to Eat podcast. And when she's not writing blogs or editing podcast episodes, you can find her in Colorado in the mountains with her husband and her English Mastiff. Welcome to the show, Roni. I'm so excited for our conversation today and to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Danny. I'm excited to be here too.
Yay. Yeah. And it's funny because I talk a lot in my programs with my clients about the importance of meal planning and the importance of having that consistent practice in your life in whatever way it works for you. But we haven't really had that conversation on the podcast yet, which is hilarious. So I'm so excited that we have connected, and I absolutely love what you and your team have created at Plan to Eat. And everybody listening, of course, there'll be like lots of links in the show notes below. Go and check out this incredible app. I haven't personally used it yet because I just found out about it, and I'm so excited to get into it. And I can just already tell it is a game changer for anybody who struggles with meal planning. So Roni, I love to kind of start these episodes off with inviting the guest to share their story. And I would love to hear yours. You know, what is it that got you into, obviously now you're working in this amazing industry and helping people meal plan, but I'm willing to bet you have a story with your own health and what kind of got you inspired into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I actually wasn't a meal planner before I started working for Plan to Eat. Well, I guess I should rephrase that because I feel like everybody is a meal planner in some sort of a way because we all are thinking about the food that we're eating, even if we're not writing it down or putting it in an app. But I wasn't what I would consider a traditional meal planner. I did spend quite a few years in my 20s mapping out my food and planning my food for like fitness related endeavors. So I really wanted to compete in a fitness competition at one point in time. And so I did the very strict like workout regimen, dieting, eating 0 calories basically. But I didn't really ever consider that to be meal planning at that point in time. So it wasn't till I started working for Plan to Eat, which was 5 years ago, that I really started to meal plan, at least the way that I do now. And, it happened just sort of as a consequence of starting working for a program that does meal planning. And now I don't think I could imagine my life without it. It's kind of crazy how like influential it is to all the aspects of my life. And I was actually just talking with the team a little bit today at lunch, and we were talking about meal planning, of course. And I was saying, the thing that's the greatest part of it for me is that when I am done with my meal plan, I can just forget about it. I don't have to be like, okay, what were we eating for Wednesday night dinner? Or like, did I buy enough things at the grocery store? Like it's in my phone. And so then, in the morning I can open up my app and I can look at my meal plan. I can go, oh yeah, I need to thaw some chicken tonight because we're going to do teriyaki chicken. And it just like takes that like huge brain drain that food can have on our lives. It just like totally eliminates that for me. And it is such a relief. It's really, you don't realize, at least I personally didn't realize like how much brain space food took up, particularly in those years where I was like dieting really hard and doing all that stuff. Like you're constantly thinking about when's my next meal? What am I eating next? How many calories are in it? And like to have all of those things be eliminated and just be like, it's fine. It's written down somewhere and I don't have to think about it anymore is amazing.
Yeah, I very personally relate to that. That was a big part for me as well. When I started like getting off sugar and wanting to eat healthier and I actually started meal planning, I was amazed at like how much brain capacity I got back and how much just that simple act of like even writing down a couple meals that I was making for the week, back then it was real rough and dirty, like just took that weight off. And I do that now. Actually, it's funny, less with meal planning because it's so intuitive for me now that I work from home. I don't find I need as rigid of a plan as I used to, absolutely used to, especially when I didn't know how to eat without sugar. But I do that for planning my weeks, like every Friday before and every day actually before I shut down work for the day, I plan the next day and it helps me like sleep better. It helps me just the things that we carry in our mind, I think, especially as women, I know you obviously, have all sorts of people in your platform, but I work mostly with women. I think we carry a lot of that burden, especially around food, right? And around what am I going to cook for my family, right? Like that burden is almost still on women usually. And we just innately kind of have that running in the background, even when we don't think it. And especially for everyone listening, here in my audience are trying to get off of sugar, right? And this is so huge. So you kind of mentioned, obviously, this one piece is the mental capacity and the like stress that we can take off just knowing that we've got a plan for the week and knowing that it's healthy. Why else do you feel like meal planning is important? What have you seen either personally or what you see with obviously all of your members and the people that you work with? Like what other gifts are in, having this practice?
Yeah, I actually think that like mental deload piece is a lot lesser known benefit of meal planning. A lot of times people don't necessarily think about that. We have a ton of people who come to meal planning because they just want their time to be more efficient, like actually, doing that upfront work is kind of like a favor to your future self, so that you're not spending that time spinning your gears every night at 5 p.m. being like, what are we going to eat? Do I need to go to the grocery store? What's in the pantry? There's just a time efficiency aspect to that is really beneficial when you start meal planning, and also savings at the grocery store. And this is something that I personally noticed a lot too, is it's just me and my husband. And for a while we were spending like close to $1,000 a month at the grocery store for two people, because this was before I started working for Plan to Eat, because I would go to the grocery store like every other day because we would be on a whim and it would just be like, we don't know what we're going to eat. Oh, let's go to the store and we'll buy some things. But whenever you go to the grocery store to buy like 3 things, you always end up buying 13 things. And so your little tiny run to the grocery store ends up being a humongous trip and you buy just a bunch of extra random things. And then the third piece of this is that also it helps with wasted food. So then when you buy all those extra random things, they can just sit in your refrigerator. That spring mix that's in your refrigerator just sits in there and wilts and you never eat it. And it just ends up getting thrown in the trash. And so there's the money saving piece and the food waste piece go hand in hand in that regard. Because it really sucks to like throw away your food and you're like, I spent my hard-earned money on that and then I never found a reason to use it. So when you're meal planning, you actually are giving the ingredients that you're buying a purpose. You're kind of giving them a job because they go specifically with a recipe that you planned. Or even if you just, added some general ingredients, you have an idea of what you're going to use them for, instead of just saying, I'll buy broccoli, we'll figure it out later. Or, even just the I'll buy chips and, somebody will snack on them. Really having that purpose for your food, brings a bunch of benefits to it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 100%. You're preaching to the choir here as well. I think everybody listening, I'm just thinking of all the clients that I've worked with, that has been a struggle, is the wasted food. And I want to add to that, coming from the inner work emotional piece that I know so well, is the guilt that comes from that, right? Saving ourselves, how many, everybody listening to this, how many times have things wilted or gone bad in your fridge and you feel not only bad because you wasted money, but the guilt of the waste of food, right? Knowing that there's people in the world that don't have food, and, all the subconscious shame and guilt and toxic energy, we'll call it, that isn't really necessary, when we could just have a plan and avoid some of those things. I mean, it's not always avoidable. I am a pretty good expert by now with knowing what's in my fridge, knowing how long it's been there, knowing what needs, it's so intuitive for me now because I've been doing it so long, but that takes a lot of time. Right. And I still am not perfect. There are still times when things go bad. I think my husband's going to finish that thing in the fridge and then 4 days goes by and he hasn't touched it and I forgot it was there. And so it's still a work in progress, but what a massive weight that we don't realize that we're carrying. Right. And I know, speaking to my audience specifically with the struggles with sugar, right, we also know how easy it is at the end of the day when we have no more decision-making willpower, like you spoke to, right? We're exhausted. Our blood sugar is crashing hard because we've been living on muffins and coffee all day. We are not 99% of the time not going to make a good decision in the evening, right? It's going to be, and I very personally have this as my story. I would come home from the office job that I had. I would pick up a pizza, order in. I would make a quick batch of pasta and cheese. That was my comfort go-to food. And it was never something healthy. It was quick because I was exhausted, right? Because I was eating shitty and the whole cycle went over again. So when we're talking about like adding to that list for you, just coming through the lens of my clients, Roni, like one of the things that is massive with any type of way of eating, whether you're, working at getting off gluten or dairy or sugar, right? And wanting to eat more blood sugar stable foods, like having a meal planning habit is mandatory. It is mandatory for all of my clients because you will not make it through, especially the detox period, if you don't have a plan, because those sabotaging mind robbers are going to be there at the end of the day unless you have yourself set up for those nourishing blood sugar, like stable foods. So that's a massive part too. And I would, add to that of any type of diet, whether you're doing an elimination diet or trying to get dairy out of your diet, anything that might be difficult for you to like remove from your diet, you've got to have a plan of like, what are you going to add back in? What are you going to nourish so you don't feel deprived? Right?
Yeah, and the meal planning part of that really, like you're saying, it enables all that to happen because, okay, so you get your meal planning done on Saturday or Sunday or something, and you look to your week ahead and you're like, okay, well, Tuesday night is crazy. We've got activities after work or something is happening. I'm like, I know I'm not going to have time to make dinner that night. Okay, well, then you just either you plan a meal that's going to come out of the freezer or you plan a crock pot meal or like you're able to continue. We really love this phrase, like doing your future self a favor. You're able to like really just look ahead and be like, okay, what's going to make this the easiest night for me possible? Because you still got to eat no matter what. And so instead of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Defaulting to going through the drive-through all the time. Maybe that can be something that people do sometimes, but I'm guessing that most people who are listening are trying to encourage a healthier lifestyle. And so like, if you're trying to get away from fast food and takeout and those kinds of things, the only way to facilitate that is to plan ahead and make sure that you're planned specifically for those busy nights when you're going to be drained. You just know that things are probably not going to go well in that day. And you just need dinner to be easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I will throw in there too. Of course, we can also plan not to eat.
Totally.
I know a lot of my listeners are playing with intermittent fasting, and actually we're recording this on a Tuesday, and this is the night my husband and I actually do date night, and we actually fast together. So we like don't make dinner tonight, and I plan those on days where we are busier, like just according to my goals. So obviously, it depends on what your goals are, right, and what your purpose is. If you have a family, that's maybe not ideal to not let your kids eat, right? We're not encouraging that. But for my biohackers out there, people who are definitely playing around with fasting and ketosis, that can be a part of your plan as well. Like those nights, I would encourage it. Those nights where there's craziness and busyness going on, make that your fasting night.
Yeah.
It's a great tool to be distracted while you're fasting, especially if you're new to it and it's uncomfortable. But yeah, no, I love that. Like those pieces, it's so funny because those pieces for me are like so second nature now. Like it's not conscious. And I think that's a message too for everyone is that in the beginning, this can feel like a lot of hard work, or it can take a lot of mental energy and even physical time to like learn this new skill, if it is a new skill for you, right? Or a new habit. And then eventually it just becomes like, I never think about meal planning. Like, rarely. Like, it's such a, like, I have a flow that works for my lifestyle and the fact that I work from home and my intuitive cooking skills. Like, I have a flow that works for me, and you'll find one that works for you. And it's just getting over those first stages, just like giving up sugar. And eventually it's just who you are now. And I don't know, did you notice that as well when you like started? And maybe how long did that take you to get to that place where it was just like easy and didn't take a lot of time and like felt really fun?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask because I am a planner personality already. So meal planning fit very intuitively into my life.
Nice.
But I don't know. I mean, I think everybody is maybe slightly different of how they approach habits and how easy it is for them to adopt habits. But like mostly the part of it that mostly the thing I think people need to think about is like, how can you make this an enjoyable experience when you're starting to build the habit? And how can you just make it really simple? So one thing that a lot of our customers think is like the most fun part of meal planning is gathering all of their fun recipes, like going online, finding their favorite bloggers or, recipe accounts and saving all of those recipes because it just kind of like sparks lots of inspiration and you might find new flavors that you really like, think you're going to enjoy. And it just can be fun to, gather all of those recipes and find new things across the internet. But then for simplification, it really just is like there's no one size fits all when it comes to meal planning. Everybody has a different style of meal planning, just like the way that I plan my week is probably different than the way that you plan your week, Danny. Like organization and planning and things like that It's all very individual and unique to a person and a household and a family. But like really the best way to start is small. So whether that's like you look at your week ahead and you think, what are 2 meals that I could plan this week? Like what are 2 dinners that I could plan? And maybe I increase the serving sizes so that we have leftovers. And then I only have to cook 2 times this week. Or you could just look at the next 3 days and you're like, okay, what are the dinners that I could plan for the next 3 days? And just taking it in those smaller bite-sized chunks, I think makes that habit building process much easier, because you're not looking at an entire month of a calendar and being like, this is so overwhelming. I have no idea. I have no inspiration for an entire month of a meal plan. Just like a writer would look at a blank page and say, now I have to write a novel from start to finish. And I'm looking at a blank page. Like it's the same thing when it comes to meal planning, that if you're looking at it really like in this like holistic way of looking at the whole thing, it can feel really intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like it can be as simple as you want it to be. It can also be as complicated as you want it to be. If you are somebody who enjoys planning and loves those like nitty gritty organization pieces, that's awesome. But if meal planning feels new and not very much fun to you, I think starting small is the best way to go.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is definitely something I wanted to dive in with you. It's like how to get started for people who aren't started. And I 100% agree. This is something that I always share with my audience as well in my programs. It's like starting small, even just with 1 meal a week. Because I know there are a lot of women out there, because I've been one of them, and I've worked with hundreds of other women now who struggle with this, in this belief that meal planning, and you mentioned this already, there's not one size fits all. There's this belief floating around out there, I don't know who started it, that a meal plan has to look a certain way, right? That it has to be 7 days, 3 meals a day, and I have to have it all planned out perfectly, and I have to follow it perfectly, and I can't change it. And like we kind of shackle ourselves into this like the all or nothing, black or white diet mentality that we really struggle with, right? And there's no sort of feminine approach. And I really love bringing that into my work, and what I share with my clients is like, can we find some flow even in having a plan, and starting small like that with like, if you're new to meal planning or you've continually failed, quote, air quotes for those listening on Apple. Like if you've continually lived this life of like feeling like you failed at meal planning, or like you were good at it for a couple of weeks and then you gave up, or it didn't work, so you threw in the towel, right? Getting back into it can feel intimidating. And it's so important to rebuild that trust. Like it's trust that we've broken with ourselves, right? And navigating back into that can be like so healing to just do, like you said, right? Is starting super simple. It does not have to be, I do not plan for 7 days, 3 meals a week. Like that would drive me crazy. I couldn't even fit all that food in my fridge. Well, I probably could. I'm really good at organizing, but that's just like too much, right? And there's no room in there for spontaneity. So sometimes like you'll be a lot more successful doing that, like 1 meal a week, right? And then when you feel confident in that, 2 meals a week, right? And starting to find those areas that are your problem child's, right? Like I know for most it's dinner, right? Maybe breakfast is easier, or maybe it is breakfast or lunch. Like what are the areas that are most challenging for you, especially, with sugar, right? Which are the ones that you're eating most junk at? Is it lunch at work, right? Maybe you need to just prep your lunches, and starting small. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. Do you have any other thoughts or tips for people who are like just starting out? So we've got obviously keep it simple, start small, figure out what works for you and your family. Are there any other pieces that you want to add there?
Well, you kind of mentioned it, which is, I think this is like this idea of flexibility, which is actually how I plan a lot. Like a lot of times I'll look at my week and I plan like a maximum of 4 dinners for a week, because it's just me and my husband. And sometimes we like to just go out to dinner, and
life happens.
Or like life happens and somebody invites us over to their house, and we want to be able to do that and not say like, oh, well, we have to stick to our meal plan. And so I think there's an aspect of this like flexibility when you're just starting out that's really important. And I mean, clearly that can continue with you. Like now I've been doing this for 5 years, and I still like really heavily rely on flexibility. But I think there's, unless you're a personality that's like obsessive when it comes to the things that you put on your meal plan, I think making sure that you're like giving yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of leniency is really important. That like, it's okay if you didn't follow your meal plan to the T this week. That doesn't mean that it's a habit you should like give up on completely. Just like I think we think about it a lot, like a workout habit, like just because you missed a workout doesn't mean that you're done with the gym, And so it's really similar with this. I think embracing that flexibility is really important. And part of that can be like, okay, well, if we made a meal and we plan to have leftovers and well, we didn't eat those leftovers. It's okay. Just put them in the freezer and you'll get to them later. And maybe it'll actually be a great thing because a night in the future, you won't have a plan and then you can just take that meal out of the freezer. So just kind of knowing that there's always options and it doesn't have to be so strict and set in stone, I think is really important.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important. So important. I'm just thinking of all my listeners and the clients that I've worked with majorly struggling with perfectionism, right? And as I mentioned earlier, the black and white thinking that has really come out of a lifetime of dieting, right? This like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
I think as women, we really struggle with that. And with meal planning, it's no different, right? And like you said, with the gym, I know there's lots of times where I've done that, like trying to build my meditation habit. It was like, well, I missed 2 days. I might as well just forget it. And
right.
Like months go by and I'm like, well, maybe I should try to meditate again. And like, I get sucked into that too. And it's just so fascinating to witness how we like abandon ourselves or abandon these habits in the name of like, well, I screwed up or I failed. So what's the point? And, switching our mindset on that, right? It's like, no, you didn't fail. And maybe even going into, I just want to like everyone who's maybe starting with this new habit is almost like expecting to fail. Like you're not going to be perfect. Yeah. And I think for me, that's really helped going into it being like, and I'm about to start a bit of a breathwork commitment for the next 10 weeks and it's intense. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be perfect at this. And that's gonna be really hard for me. And I'm going to be facing a lot of these challenges on days where like I miss a practice or so like but going in with that mentality of knowing that I'm not going to do this perfect has really supported me and kind of letting go of some of that pressure, right? Some of that pressure expectation that I put on myself that's not helpful. So when the day comes, when I do miss a breathwork practice, right? Or I miss doing that meal plan that I planned for, then I'm more likely to be like, okay with that. And like you said, that flexibility is so important. I found that too, like 3 or 4 meals a week is really the sweet spot because there's always going to be leftovers you didn't plan for, right? And there's always going to be, exactly like you said, someone inviting you out for dinner or spontaneous fasting night or, it's so amazing how, throughout the week, things can shift and change and finding that groove is key, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think that we, as humans, maybe as women in particular, we don't realize like how much pressure we put on ourselves to follow through with like our commitments and stuff and make it be perfect rather than just giving ourselves some leniency and thinking like, okay, like 80% is still amazing. My husband has this phrase that he loves to repeat where he's like, something is better than nothing. Like putting in some effort and doing something even halfway is better than not doing it at all, because then you're just left with not doing anything at all.
Yeah, I love that. And that totally applies here with meal planning. And, I think one of the things too that I want to add in about the flexibility that's really helped me is even the flexibility around like, as I'm healing my relationship with food. And again, I know my audience here, so I'm really speaking to all of you who struggle with this too, is like, we want to really love what we're eating, right? And by the way, for those who don't know it, you can eat whole real foods that aren't loaded with sugar that are absolutely delicious. And learning how to cook is a whole nother conversation. And it's such a skill that we need. But there's times where, for instance, like when I meal plan, I used to have a belief that, okay, if I've planned, to make tacos on Monday, I have to eat tacos on Monday, right? And now I don't have any day attached to what I meal plan. I write down those 3 or 4 meals that I'm going to make. I have them actually on my whiteboard. And that's all I need. And then I can choose, like Monday night comes around or Monday morning if I have to pull things out of the freezer or whatever. And I can go, okay, what do I want today for dinner? Like what would excite me to eat for dinner tonight? And maybe it's not the tacos. Maybe it's the thing that the chicken that I had planned for Thursday, right? That I want to eat today. Right. So like allowing some of that, also that joy of not forcing yourself to eat something just because you picked the day and time for it. Obviously, yes, if there's like things going bad, that's a factor, right? If that meat needs to be eaten today, then, maybe you can cook it and freeze it, or maybe you can find a way to make it fun for you. But I think there's that piece as well that we often, like you said, really force ourselves to like stick to something or do something in the way that we said, and we don't allow ourselves that flexibility to listen to what our body wants, listen to our needs. Like, you know what? No, tonight I really feel like that good chicken and I'm going to do tacos tomorrow night. Right. And allowing yourself to, obviously involving your family in that, right? If your kids are involved or your husband, right? Say, hey, how do you guys feel about switching this up today? I think that's an important part of that flexibility too. That I just came up while you were talking about that.
No, it totally is. And I mean, for me, a lot of the time, that flexibility happens when, like, related to the weather, like if it snows, I'm like, I want something warm and comforting. Like, I want like a soup or a stew or something. And then if it's hot or, and then it's like, I live in Colorado. So like the weather is changing all the time. And so it's like, it could be snowing one day and like 60 degrees the next day. And so, what you have planned for tonight might be not what you want in that moment because it doesn't feel like comforting and soothing because it's cold and snowy outside. And so I don't really want to eat something that's, like a cold dish. I want something that's warm and yummy. So I think that's an aspect of that flexibility in there too. And I plan exactly the way that you do. Even though I label my things as, like Monday through Thursday, it's like, okay, what's going to be from these 4 recipes? What's it going to be tonight? What should I take out of the freezer? It's just, it's very flexible. And we do encounter people who have a hard time incorporating that kind of flexibility. I think it's just a mental block for a lot of people of like, well, I said Tuesday was Taco Tuesday, and I'm having a hard time differentiating from that, but
Taco Thursday also sounds good.
Exactly. Yeah. It also starts with a T. It could be the same. Yeah. So yeah, you're not the only one. I mean, there's lots of people who struggle with that for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I would absolutely agree that there's a mental block. There's a lot of pieces there around and I know, okay, this is going a totally different direction, but I want to say this because there's a lot of people listening and a lot of my clients. I know that like food is almost our only sense of control in our lives, right? And there's this deeper rooted need for control to help us feel safe in our bodies and our lives. Like there's a lot of inner work and a lot of deep stuff that like I'm very aware of has shown up in my patterns with food. It's like, choosing when to eat and what to eat and having that obsessive plan in any area of my life was my way of dealing with my anxiety and my underlying like nervous system dysregulation and a lot of trauma and a lot of different things and beliefs that are showing up for me. So for anyone who's like really rigid in that way, just know that that's okay. There's of course nothing wrong with that, but understanding that this journey to really having a healthy relationship with food, I really strongly believe does involve like stepping more into our feminine and doing that inner healing work around like, why do I need to be so rigid and planned, right? I mean, that is also a byproduct of growing up in the patriarchy. Like we live in a world that prioritizes extroverts and planning and masculine energy of plan. And yes, that is actually very important when we're first starting getting off sugar, because if we don't have a rigid plan, we're more likely to just like totally go back into the ice cream. But as we get into learning ourselves better and finding a flow, I think that's part of the conversation as well. It's like understanding, like, is this control or this planning that I'm doing, like, is it coming from a place of like love and centeredness and like, this is what works for me? Or is it coming from a place of like fear of the unknown and, like fear of that flexibility? Like you and I are having this conversation about flexibility. And I know there's a lot of people listening that are like, tightness in their chest. Like I couldn't do it like that. Like that I would just go off the rocker, and that gives me anxiety just thinking about not knowing what day I'm cooking what and all that stuff. Right. So just an opportunity, planting the seed for all of you listening, that there's maybe some beautiful work to do there too.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you saying that, I'm like, that was me 10 years ago when I was like thinking I wanted to do fitness competitions and stuff. It was like, if my calories for the day was set at 1,800 calories or something like that, I could not go over by a single calorie. Otherwise I failed for the entire day. And I think that we can get in these really rigid patterns that do not serve us very well in that regard. And food is really, I think you're totally right. Food is really easy to fall into those patterns with because it's a really easy part of our lives to control. And, we eat multiple times a day, most of us. And so, there's multiple opportunities in our day to harness that control and get kind of like maybe like that dopamine of like, I did the good thing, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah, that one thing that went right today, right?
Yeah.
Like that one thing that I could control, because that is a part of it. I mean, we live in a world that is riddled with things we can't control, right? And there's this like drive internally for us to feel like there's one thing that we can like, do right, or one thing that will go according to plan, right?
Yeah.
That's a bigger conversation for another day, for sure. But I'm curious, Kay, I want to switch gears and ask you here, like, why do you think a lot of people struggle with actually building a consistent meal planning habit? Like, why does it seem that that habit for some people can really feel unattainable or scary? Like, I know we've talked about a little bit of that, but what do you see that really like trips people up? Maybe they get started really well and then all of a sudden they're throwing in the towel, right? Is it just that black and white thinking perfectionism that we talked about, or, what else shows up here that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to put meal planning as kind of like a bottom of your list kind of a thing, it's, if you have a list of to-dos, meal planning doesn't seem as important as folding the laundry or vacuuming or, other like, mundane chores that you could do. Cause it's not a very like sexy idea. The idea of planning ahead for a lot of people is not very intriguing. And so I think that holds a lot of people back, is they don't I think just a lot of people in general don't feel the importance of like how meaningful it actually is to plan out your meals, and the benefits that you can see when you're actually doing it. I think most people, even if you're not a budgeter, most people are like, yeah, I see the benefits of creating a budget, sticking to a budget. Even if you're not the person who does that, you can understand and see how that's beneficial for people. But meal planning, while it's very similar to budgeting, most people, I feel like just there's not this universal knowledge yet of like meal planning being such like an umbrella task that has so many benefits underneath it. And I think that just not being aware of those benefits really like hinders people from creating the habit, and just feeling, I think it's once again going back to this feeling of overwhelm of like, I really don't know how to get started. And I feel like I need to do it right the first time when I get started. There's a lot of those mental blockers in there too that I think keep people from doing something. And so instead they do nothing, and they're like, it's fine. Whatever we're doing now works. It's not a big deal. But you don't realize how much stress, again, going back to the mental load, you don't realize how much stress food is putting on your life until you can kind of take that off your proverbial plate and not have it be an every night stressor or an everyday stressor kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? It's really reminding me of, I mean, very parallel to even just the blocks we have around getting off sugar, stopping, the processed food addictions that we struggle with. Is this like, we don't know what it feels like. I'm fascinated by all of this being dictated by like how we feel in our body. Right. And often like our normal is all we know, right? And we think things are fine until we experience something different, and our mind is blown and our body is blown because we had no idea it could feel so much better, right? We've kind of become accustomed to, I know a lot of my clients will say, always have digestive upset after meals, and it's just normal, right? That's like, there's nothing wrong with that. That happens to my friends, like all these, the sort of the myth of normal, right? Like that doesn't mean that it's healthy, right? And we just have become complacent to like, things aren't that bad, or convincing ourselves, and that's our ego at work, that things don't actually need to change or that they couldn't be better. And then we go and have an experience where maybe we spend 4 weeks meal planning and we have that embodied experience for ourselves of, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how much less stressed I feel, how much happier I feel, like how much healthier I feel because I'm eating good food. And we just like, it's really hard to future cast that when we've never had that experience in our body. Right. So there's a lot of like trust that I see, like, and I'm even just thinking specifically with going off of sugar, like people have never been off it their whole life. They have no idea how good they can feel. They only have a mental conception of it, of like what other people have said or what they've read online of how good it feels to meal plan or to get off sugar. But until you actually like physically experience that for yourself, it's hard to sometimes take that leap. And that's like a big gap that I see a lot of my clients struggle with, is like taking that plunge and just trusting in like that experience of exploration of like, how is this going to change my life? Right. So maybe even that as like a starting point. I don't know if that's something that you encourage people to like set sort of a challenge of like, do this for 4 weeks and then reassess, or like just give yourself like maybe a little challenge to get started so that you can like experience for yourself how good that feels.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely a mindfulness piece related to all habits, but things like meal planning that, like I said, don't feel very intriguing to begin with, but having that mindfulness of, okay, so you planned 2 dinners this week. How was Tuesday night? Was it better than normal? Like, did you feel less stressed about food? Was it much easier to get dinner on the table? Like actually just tuning in. And I'm sure you encourage your listeners with this all the time, is like actually tuning in to like, how did this make me feel? Like, what was it actually better? Was it worse? What could I have done differently next time? Like, I think that there's this like processing that we have to be constantly doing especially when we're trying to build new habits. And so much of it revolves around just like being more present and being more mindful about how is this new habit actually improving or changing my life? And do I like that or do I not like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Does it work and not work? I mean, that just reminds me of such an important reminder of, like, I know when I started meal planning, like I don't even remember what strategy I was following. This was like many years ago, but I would do it for a while and then realize it wasn't working for me. Like, it wasn't working for my life. And I think that's that piece of that flexibility, is like trying on maybe a meal planning style or some sort of system and then adjusting it. Right? Like, maybe meal planning on Sundays doesn't work because your weekends are super busy, but maybe Wednesday's great. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to do it Monday through Sunday, by the way. It can be Wednesday through Tuesday, right? Like, there's no rule book here, which I know for a lot of people brings up that anxiety again, right? But like, adjusting as you go, I think, was such an important piece for me. And like, it feels like every year my sort of flow and what feels good and what works for my lifestyle, my body, changes. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to adapt to that. And just by listening, like you said, being present, right? Is this working? Is it feeling good? Is it not? And having those checkpoints, every week or every month, to really like recalibrate and be willing to like change direction a little bit, and until you
Mm-hmm.
find what really works for you.
Yeah, I don't think that, to me, the mindfulness aspect of most habits, including meal planning, it feels like it's not talked about very often.
Yeah.
It feels like most people are like, oh, that's like the up leveled version, of creating a habit. Whereas to me, it feels like it really should be a natural part of the process of, I think a lot of times we get a little too tuned out of ourselves and the way that we're feeling and the way that our surroundings and everything are affecting us. And so it's just, to me, it's really important to just, take a little step back and realizing, did I like this? Did I not like this? Similar to how like our palates can change over time. And, the recipes that you're eating this month might not be the same ones that you were enjoying back in April. It all can be evolving and changing. And even when you go through, one of the great things I think about meal planning is that you can go through different stages of your life, and your meal planning habit can evolve with you. Like if you add kids to the mix, you can start figuring out like, what do they like? How do I plan for them? How can I get them involved in the kitchen? Or, maybe like a parent has to come and live with you or something, and you start to work around those things. Like it's just something that I really feel can evolve and travel with you through the rest of your life. But I also think that you have to be mindful of it, and you have to be aware of when it's serving you and when it's not serving you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a powerful reminder. Okay. I have a selfish question that I want to ask, because I know that I'm not the only one who's struggled with this in the past. Is like, do you have any tips, or what do you guys talk about at Plan to Eat when life gets busy, when maybe I'm feeling uninspired or traveling, like where we're out of our everyday routine, or there's like these hiccups that come because it's life, or like a mass pandemic hits, like life just throws things at you sideways. How do we stick with the meal plan? Like, how do we, because I know that's been a big thing that's tripped me up in the past, is like all of a sudden getting slammed. It's super busy. I missed my planning date with myself on Wednesday night because it just like the day got away from me. And now it's like, how do I get back into that rhythm or pick it up again? Feels really impossible. So yeah, do you have any tips or like pieces of advice that you can share for anyone who may be struggling with that?
Yeah, I think going back to the flexibility piece is really important. So, like, if your plan was to do your meal plan on Wednesday and you finally are like on Friday, you're like, oh my gosh, we don't have a meal plan. This is just turning out horribly. Okay, we'll just take 5 minutes and plan a couple recipes or something. Just, start where you are, rather than trying to, feel guilty and whatever for what happened earlier in the week. Just like start where you are. Once again, like just be flexible, start small. I think that if you're part of what's hindering you from doing any meal planning is a lack of inspiration, I love to incorporate like a friend, somebody that has good taste, like you guys like the same flavors. One of my best friends, we text like every single week being like, what are you eating this week? Or, we're having this for a dinner, but I don't know what to eat as a side dish. And it really helps once again, with that like mental burden, it helps to incorporate another person into the picture. And that person might not always be your partner or anybody else that you have in your household, because they can get stuck in the same ruts that you do. If you're like, well, we've eaten meatballs like 4 times this month and I don't want to eat meatballs anymore, but nobody here can think of something else to eat. It's really helpful to like recruit outside and have somebody who, like my best friend, she was like, oh yeah, we had mashed parsnips. And I was like, I would never have thought to make that, And so it can really just incorporate new things, some more inspiration. Potentially you could learn how to cook new things as well, which is always kind of fun. And I think fun is kind of a part of this too, is like figuring out like, where does the creativity come in with meal planning? And maybe it's not exactly with the meal planning itself, but like maybe you're somebody who really enjoys cooking and like you feel like your life is crazy and you don't have time to cook, but Saturday afternoon, you have some free time. And so you're going to try a new recipe or try some new ingredients. Like I think including some like fun and some creativity into the process is really helpful too. If your schedule is just crazy busy, there are tons of resources on the internet for 15-minute meals, things that you can do at home that are super easy. It might not be quote unquote as healthy as something that you took 3 hours to make and simmered on the stove and things like that. But I'm going to bet that it's still better than running through the drive-through. Yeah. And so I think there's just lots of these like little things that you can do that make things easier. And, I know a lot of people struggled during the pandemic because it forced everybody back into their homes and they weren't able to go and just get takeout and things like that. So a lot of people had to discover like, what do I like to cook? What do I even know how to cook? And so I think part of that can be a fun exploration too, is just figuring out like, hey, I've never, used our smoker before, maybe we got a smoker last year for Christmas and we've never actually made anything on it. So like learning some of those things and like reading about new techniques. I personally think all of that's really fun. I love to cook. So for me, those are some of my tips.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm the same. And I also know that there are a lot of listeners who do not relate to that at all. Yeah. I hate cooking. I suck at cooking, all these beliefs. And there's a lot of reasons why that showed up, right? I mean, as a society, we've like you talked about earlier with meal planning, but we've just deprioritized cooking in general.
Totally.
Right? It's like not important, not as important as running around doing all the things for everyone else, right? And then we leave cooking and sleeping, like at the bottom of our like task list. And it's so backwards and it's so toxic. And I love that you brought in that idea of creativity and fun. I love talking a lot about that as well, because cooking is such a beautiful creative endeavor for us to even tap into our feminine energy, to tap into like the creativity. That's exactly what you said. That's exactly what it is like finding a way to make that fun. And for some, that might not be trying a new recipe. That might be really terrifying. And I know that because I've worked with a lot of clients who are like, new to cooking. And that is just like so overwhelming. So find a recipe that you do like and maybe work on perfecting it. Right. And getting like, maybe it's fun to notice how much quicker you cook it the next time that you do it again. Like maybe those are some things that you can like tune into to make it enjoyable. Right. I love those. Another thing that like popped up for me, that's a tool that I used with my husband a long time ago, is for those who aren't like Roni and I and don't love to cook, is making your own little recipe book, or obviously using Plan to Eat, right? An area where you have your favorite go-to 5 recipes that you feel confident in cooking. So maybe that's like your chili and your teriyaki chicken and your tacos, like whatever that is. Maybe you've got recipes that you can cook without even looking at a recipe, right? And maybe feeling really confident in those, so that on those nights when you're busy, right? It's obviously going to take a lot more time and mental energy to make a new recipe, right? So if you can find ones that you can perfect for yourself, that could be like your quick go-tos, that saved me a lot in the past. Like, I have my go-tos that I don't even like need recipes for, right? And can just whip up, and like, as long as I have the ingredients, right? Have that go. So that's the big one. And using your freezer. I know you didn't, you mentioned this before earlier in the episode, right? Is batch cooking is like a lifesaver. I always have like at least 5 meals in the freezer, and I've used them a lot. It's been like a lifesaver so many times, because I can't use that excuse of I have no healthy food, I better order pizza, right? I can't use that excuse because there's something healthy in the freezer. Yeah, there's so many good things here, Roni. This is amazing. So as we sort of wrap things up, I know we could go so many directions with this, but I just want to, ask if there's any final like meal planning tips, any things that we really didn't get to cover today that you feel are really important to share with those who are either new to this habit or have tried it in the past and feel like they failed and want to get back into it, or those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think just the last thing, and this kind of relates back to the last question a little bit, is like don't be afraid to ask for help. Like I know as women, we like to take on a lot of things. We like to be the ones in charge of a lot of stuff. And, maybe you've always done the cooking in your household and didn't even realize that your partner also really loves to cook, or maybe they really love to bake and, like want to incorporate some of those things. And I don't know. I think just asking for help is really important. So, when you have those times where you're like, life is just crazy, I have no idea, it can be really awesome to be like, hey, I have all of the ingredients for this recipe, but I don't have time to make it tonight. Will you do this for me? Not only does that relieve some of that burden off of you, like it might make your partner feel more valued in that night. There's a lot of benefits I think come from asking for help, and it's really hard to do. I struggle with it for sure. Yeah. But I think that's an important piece of the process too, is just making sure like you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. And even if you don't live with anybody, right, that can be a friend.
Yeah,
like you
totally.
said, I know you text your friend, but
yeah,
love the idea of like having a friend come over and you guys could cook together maybe and both take meals home. I know that people have done like batch cooking parties, and
that's what I was going to say is like freezer meal parties, like get a group of people together and you can all swap freezer meals. Like that's super fun to do.
So fun. And you kind of get to do two things at once, right? You get some socializing in and hopefully some good quality time with people that you love and you get some meals prepped for the week, right? So it's like a win-win. Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely amazing, Roni. I would love actually if you're open to sharing maybe a little bit more specifically about Plan to Eat. Obviously, everybody's going to go and check out the website and can find more there. But I would love, if you can share just a little bit about like what it is. I know we've kind of talked about it being an app, but what are some of the features people can look forward to, and maybe how can they get started with it?
Totally. Yeah. So Plan to Eat is essentially tools to meal plan. So we don't provide recipes or meal plans within the program. It is a recipe book, a meal planning calendar, and a shopping list. And so in the program, you add in all of the recipes that you know and love. So whether that's 5 recipes that you know how to make and make on repeat, or 10,000 recipes that you've found from all over the internet. We have a really cool feature called a recipe clipper, and you can just go to a website and you can click on it has a little bookmark on your browser, and you can just click on that and it'll import the recipe into your account. You don't have to read all of the stuff in the blog about somebody's vacation to the countryside. You can just go to the
jump to recipe.
Yeah, you can just jump to the recipe and import that into your account. And then once you have you have all your recipes in your account, you get to create your own custom meal plans that work for you and your schedule, your diet and budget and all of those things. And then once you've created a meal plan, the program creates a shopping list for you. So it takes the hardest part of meal planning, which is writing out all of the things on your shopping list, does that for you. It organizes them in categories so that you can change them so that they're like the aisles in your store. So that way, when you're walking through the store, you actually walk in the right order of the store and you're not going from the produce aisle all the way back to the toothpaste, and backtracking across the store. Yeah. So we have both an app and a website. Some people prefer the mobile and some people prefer website. I kind of do a bit of both. I like to meal plan on my computer and then take my phone to the store with me for grocery shopping. So.
That's amazing. Can you share that shopping list with family members? Like I'm seeing that my husband does a lot of the shopping, and we love that we have this like really shitty recipe or shopping list app on our phone. I will be guilty. It works for now, but I'm loving that we can have an upgrade to that. So you can share it.
Yeah, you can share your account with other people so that they can see your meal plan and they can use the shopping list. And as long as you both have, like an internet connection, you can even be adding things to the shopping list while he's at the grocery store, and it'll update in real time for him.
Oh my gosh, that would drive him mad. No more items. Wait, items. Sorry, we're too late. I had left the store already. That would be his excuse. That's amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll post the link, of course, to go and check it out below. I know you guys have some amazing offers, and it's really, really affordable to join. I'm so excited to try it out myself and to possibly be using this going forward with my programs. Little teaser. We're figuring out all the details of how to do that. And I'm still sorting through that because I have a massive recipe library that I use with my clients inside my programs. And that would be so cool to have that all organized into this easy to use, like recipe book for everybody
Yeah.
to dive into as they go on their sugar-free journeys, which is so helpful. So thank you for all that you guys are doing. I know that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with having software and an app like this. And yeah, I'm really excited to dive in myself, and hopefully everybody listening, you found this really helpful as well and feeling ready and inspired to go and do some meal planning.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been really awesome to be here.
Yes. Amazing to have you. So grateful, Roni. And thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.